Bilok, what are you doing? Oh my god, Bilok, please! Alrighty everyone, hello, and welcome back to another episode of my nonsense, and definitely also Bilok's nonsense. Hi, Greenbeach! He is upset because I will not let him jump on the bookshelf and knock my root beer into the abyss. Obey! No evil bad man, no! No. As you can no doubt also see, it is very cold, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, and that has me feeling all kinds of ick. So, this is going to be, a bit of a cozy vibe, but nonetheless an important vibe, because as we get into the spooky season, I, as a lover of ghost stories, keep noticing that a lot of these movies keep getting ghosts and demons and other supernatural things very messed up. So, I'm very excited to talk about that, and specifically to talk about basically these specific films. These are the ones I'm going to be referencing, because I just watched the latest Conjuring, and God, do I have feelings about these things. I should definitely also say there are going to be spoilers, because I'm just going to be talking about like the films and like stuff that happens in them. So if you haven't seen any of these films and you want to, just keep that in mind. There's just spoilers galore in here. So, you know. Before we get into all that though, hello, my name is Sarah Streisand. I am a Christian witch, content creator, educator, writer, specifically a writer of this book right here, Discovering Christian Witchcraft, which if you heard the term Christian witch and you said, what? Discovering Christian Witchcraft is a book that goes over exactly what you would think it does. What the Bible says about witchcraft, the mistranslations associated with that, what witchcraft means in the modern era, and how all of our Christian ancestors have been doing this thing we call Christian witchcraft the entire damn time. What are you doing? Is this what you want? You want to play with the root beer? Of course you want to play with it. This is my life. I can't have shit with this bird. If you don't want to grab a book just yet though, by all means, go ahead and like this video, subscribe, hit the bell so that you can get all of the new videos that come out every single Friday. And if you are not new here, hello, and welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us again. And I will remind all of you that if you want to get these videos 2 weeks early and ad-free, all you gotta do is hop over to my Patreon where I post these and a lot of other stuff. And one of those things I do post on my Patreon are my interviews with the gods, right? Which is a series that has become part of this book series here, where the gods left off and when angels and demons collude. And in that, I do talk to spirits, like, saints, as in the dead, TM, like pagan deities, like angels, and like demons, like the demons that show up in some of these very silly, goofy movies that I love so much. And as a witch, I can tell you that while there are some things about supernatural beings that, yeah, the movies get correct, there's a lot of shit they just don't. There's a lot of stuff they do not get correctly. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, as well as what they get right, and also why they seem to get it so wrong. So when we think about ghosts, naturally we think about a lot of these silly movies that we're about to talk about, and we think a lot about, all the scary things that comes with that, this force that seems to be unnatural and therefore intruding on our space, right? But I think also another reason that ghost stories are constantly so in our minds is because a lot of people claim to have some kind of experience with them. In fact, from a more Christian perspective, I was listening to St. Anthony's Tongue's podcast about this. This is really cool. You should really check out this creator. I love the stuff that he does. And his most recent video about do Catholics believe in ghosts was really, really cool, especially to hear that saints like St. Thomas Aquinas pretty much outlined that, yes, God can allow the spirits of the dead, as in the saints, right, the cloud of witnesses, the saints up there that are now alive in Christ, he can allow them to come down and to give us hints, give us signs, that they're okay in heaven or things like that. Or that they can come up from hell to terrify us and warn us away from whatever it is that we're doing, or that they can contact us from purgatory asking for prayers, asking for help, that they make it through and get to heaven and all that other kind of stuff. So that's really, really interesting to know. And again, you should check out this video because it was very, very cool in that aspect. And I was so excited to hear about that, especially from a theologian like St. Thomas Aquinas. But knowing that this is viable, and knowing also that as a witch, you know, I've had these experiences with spirits and demons and all these other things. Naturally, when I look at these movies, I'm always thinking about it from the perspective of my own actual experiences, not from necessarily story so much. And in terms of those experiences, I've absolutely had a lot of my own, right? So when I was growing up, you know, I had never met my grandfather on my mom's side because he unfortunately died before I was born. But I definitely still had encounters with him in many different ways whenever my Oma would come over. It really seemed like he was watching over her or following after her, because when my Oma would leave, go back home to Germany, everything would stop. Nothing would go crazy. But every time she came, we joked that she was like taking Opa in her suitcase with her, because that's when the lights would start turning on and off. That's when the radio would start turning on and off. That's when you'd hear doors slam, you'd hear big heavy footsteps in the basement, and all these other kinds of things. I even heard footsteps out in the hallway one time and saw a big shadow of a man just directly at the foot of my bed. That was something else. And my mom has always said that she believes in spirits, she believes they're around us, and even like, you know, later on when one of my uncles passed away, my aunt went to get, you know, some kind of solace or some kind of guidance from a Catholic priest, and the Catholic priest said, heaven is not up there, heaven is all around us. And all of these people that have passed on from the physical, they're still here around us in the spiritual. And yes, they can come and knock on your door. They can come and try and get some kind of message to you if they so choose. Demons are kind of the same thing, but, you know, whereas people keep making these goofy movies where they seem to just, you know, open up the Ars Goetia and just pluck at random a demon out of there to make their big bad for their movies. Demons, they can come around. They can definitely let you know they're there. I've had some experiences with that as well, especially when I first started working with demons. Yeah, they would manifest in some strange ways too. One of the most startling was when I was at the gym and I watched a weight that was like laying like this, right? It was laying this way. And it was big, heavy, it was like 70 pounds. And I watched it just pop and then kind of fall off the thing, right? It wasn't like unstable. It didn't just slip off. It literally popped up and fell over. And I was just kind of watching that like, oh, okay. All right. That's interesting. I don't really know how that happened, but okay. Another, right, is when, and this is where I had to be like, hello, no more of this, was when I was taking my laundry out of my car. And I looked up and I saw a very dark shadow of a person on the other side of my car. And I almost dropped my freshly cleaned laundry. And if I had, I would have just completely gone scorched earth on everything, let me tell you. So that's when I had to say, hello, demons. I understand that you're there. Thank you. Please stop just popping up. If I drop my laundry, I'm going to lose my mind. So don't do that. And it stopped. Because believe it or not, demons aren't necessarily out trying to fuck up your life, contrary to Hollywood and everyone else's popular belief. So, again, we're looking at these stories here. Some of them are TV shows like Marianne, which is a really, really cool French series on Netflix. But most of the other ones are movies, and the movies can go in different directions, right? Not always is the ghost or demon or whatever thing is going on in these videos necessarily a bad thing, but 9 times out of 10 in these haunting movies, you'll find that the ghost is some kind of antagonistic force. It's not like a very positive force, whether that is in movies like The Conjuring or in Insidious or in Amityville Horror or any of these other things. Usually whatever is haunting people is not like the happiest, friendliest, cutest dude. And I'm going to point to this first because while this isn't technically something that the movies get wrong, nor is it something that they do 100% of the time, I will say it's highly overrepresented. As a witch who engages in these kinds of spiritual encounters in the first place. A lot of the spirits you're going to find rolling around are not out to get you. They really could give a damn that you even exist, actually. Yet still, movies like the Amityville Horror, right, they will have human spirits who have done terrible things that are now haunting you, or in the case of like the Pope's Exorcist, they have this demon that's out to haunt you just for the fun of it, really. And from what I know of demons, they don't care to hassle you like that. They have way much more going on. If you actually engage with them, work with them, talk with them, or explore them, they have way much more going on in their own existence, in their own realm of influence, than to just go randomly haunting a family or possessing children or anything like that people say that they do. In fact, in the Pope's Exorcist, to the grandest surprise of me and anyone else who's ever worked with a demon, of all the beings they could have chosen for this situation, they chose King Asmodeus, which not only like as one of the demon kings, does that just not make any sense, because demons of that caliber, of the king level, don't really fuck around like that, but also because even in King Asmodeus's myths, he's really not ever represented as someone who's just going to go around causing chaos like that for fun. In fact, in any of the places we see a demon like King Asmodeus, if they're doing some weird stuff like that, it's because they were antagonized first. King Asmodeus specifically and King Solomon just continuously butting heads because King Solomon went out of his way to try and trap Asmodeus, and actually did succeed in using his power to build a temple of God. Of course, when King Asmodeus gets free, he literally kicks King Solomon halfway across the world, assumes King Solomon's identity, and does a lot of crazy stuff in between. But even then, King Asmodeus is not a black and white character, and perhaps this is something else that these ghost movies get wrong, especially with spirits and demons. Like, as an extension of this point, they're not inherently all bad or all good. Even within the same being, they're not all bad or all good. Sure, King Asmodeus can cause a lot of trouble, can do a lot of stuff, but even in his myths, he can be seen showing some kind of demon's version of compassion to people. There's a story about King Asmodeus where he notices a drunk man just kind of stumbling around drunk and not knowing what to do with himself, really. And the angels that this man can't see are in the background just basically talking shit about him. Hi. Talking shit about how this drunk is never going to get into heaven because he's such a, belligerent and flawed, I don't know, sinful bastard, basically. King Asmodeus hears them talking and is like, damn, that sucks. So what he does is he gives the drunk guy some more alcohol, which on the surface doesn't look helpful, right? Naturally. But King Asmodeus is thinking as well, if he doesn't have anything good waiting for him in heaven, he might as well enjoy the hell out of what he's got here on earth. Again, it's not what people would say is truly compassionate. True compassion maybe would be to help that man stop being a drunk, sure. But in a demon's mind, that is still mercy. To let them numb themselves now, knowing that later there's nothing good coming. And even in other ones like Amityville Horror, or any of these other ones, if that's truly an issue of like an evil person did evil things that are tied to this specific place, that's more of like a residual haunting in the first place then, which residual hauntings, if anyone knows anything about that ghost hunting theory, residual hauntings aren't conscious. They don't have motives, they don't have anything really to think about or do, because they're basically just like a pre-recorded playing of ghost activity. Those residual hauntings are ones you're going to see talked about pretty often in places like really old hotels or really old houses, where you've got ghosts just kind of walking the same path every night, even through walls, because maybe the original construction of whatever was going on didn't have a wall there or something like that. These aren't the actual spirits. These are kind of just, again, they're just echoes left behind. So they wouldn't be out there haunting you in the first place. One movie that is really interesting, though, and that does get this, actually, some nuance in here with this, is actually Kevin Bacon's Stir of Echoes. This movie was very silly. I loved it a lot, but it was very silly. The writing was kind of goofy a lot of times, but I really enjoyed that the ghost here was not a ghost that was trying to antagonize the main character, even if it was kind of spooky. She was a ghost that, like in other stories, the Lovely Bones and stuff, is one who is just trying to get justice for herself because she was brutally and wrongly murdered. It's not that she was trying to scare the main character, it's not that she was trying to cause trouble, but she was trying to give him clues as to what was going on through dreams and other things like that, so that he could figure out the mystery, uncover her body, and let her soul finally rest. That is going to be more accurate to why anyone's getting haunted than some random malicious nonsense that these movies always try to make it out to be. Look at this evil, terrible man. Evil, terrible man.
Look, you're going right to hell.
Going to hell.
Asmodeus said so.
So one thing right away that we can square away is that a lot of these movies get wrong that ghosts are inherently bad or inherently out to get you, or that even demons give enough of a shit about you that they're going to come bother you out of the absolute blue like that. And speaking of demons, another thing that a lot of these movies get wrong is that when they discover that there is a demon afoot, when they discover that the problem is demons, their ways of exorcising the demon make no sense half the time. Big offender of this one is Marianne. In this show, it's discovered that the spirit of a witch that like this main character had been writing about, they discover that this witch is real, actually, that she's a real spirit that has been inspiring the writer of all of these kind of horror mystery novels, and she causes a bunch of problems for the writer and for all of her friends and family. And it turns out that this witch in this French lore was married to some demon, like married to the demon, like kind of god spousal type thing, but to a demon, a member of the Ars Goetia. I forget which one right now, but I'm sure I'll find it. And in order to get rid of Marianne, the witch in question, this witch spirit, the writer's friends go and draw a massive fucking sigil of the demon on the wall, which is patently the silliest thing I've ever heard of. Why on earth would you go and put down the sigil of the demon that the ghost is spoused to try and exorcise it? All you're doing is calling her ghost husband there to come kick your ass, which he does. Some of these supernatural shows genuinely have me understanding why my parents yell at the screen in football, because when I watch these things and I watch the insane blunders the characters make, my first question is, how the fuck, who researched this? And my second question is, why would anyone ever think that that's what you need to do? Another thing with exorcisms is that just like the writers of these shows, they always have a Catholic priest in them, but they never seem to ask how a Catholic priest would do an exorcism. The Pope's Exorcist was pretty fun and obviously in-depth. Pope's Exorcist is actually based off of the real writings of this exorcist here, Father Amort, which he wrote a whole book about these things, which I really want to read one day. Let me know in the comments if you want to see me react and review that book that he wrote. I would love to. But that's like a more in-depth kind of like procedural thing. A lot of the other ones that I see though just have the fucking Catholic priest rolling around sprinkling holy water everywhere, and that's about it. Like in the latest Conjuring movie, we've got these guys just rolling around in the name of the Father and Son and Holy Spirit, and that's like all they're saying, and it's like, in the name of the Father and Son, Holy Spirit, what? What are you asking to be done in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit? They're just flashing water around, and then for some reason the water is like also steaming. It's creating steam that just kind of wafts up, which also doesn't make any sense. Same thing happens in the reboot of Amityville Horror with Ryan Reynolds in it. They're just walking around sprinkling holy water. And then, against all sense and reason, they are investigating all the spooky spiritual things that happen around them. In the Amityville Horror especially, the priest, like, I don't know, starts doing his thing. He gets locked in the room with the spirit closing doors on him, and then he goes and checks out a noise in the vent only to get hit in the face with a bunch of bugs. Why would you... Knowing how spirits work, knowing how illusion is a major factor of them, why would you climb up a massive fucking ladder to go look into the vent and then freak out when a bunch of flies or bugs or something come and hit you in the face? Like, it's like if a wasp exterminator went to go check out a weird noise and shoved his face directly into a wasp nest. Why would that be what you do? Like, what? And speaking of the bugs, another thing that like irks me a lot is when people have ghosts or demons or something physically manifesting in major ways. When they have ghosts like being presented as physical attackers or like physical beings or doing some physical damage, especially like in the latest Conjuring movie when this magic mirror is just spinning and also just like, I don't know, killing everybody somehow. Like, that generally, no. Ghosts and demons don't work physically. And that's what actually ironically makes them some of my favorite stories. When we're talking about horror movies, the reason I don't like stuff like serial killer movies or vampire movies or, you know, werewolf movies or whatever else is because if it's a physical being, it's easy to deal with. If it's not a physical being, you gotta think outside the box a little bit and usually also reflect on yourself, which we'll get into more later. But as such, when I see movies showing ghosts as physical attackers or manifesting physically like that, it just kind of takes away some of the intrigue, but also isn't really how ghosts work. More of what ghosts do is what we see a lot in, ironically, things like Amityville Horror, as much as they mess some stuff up. Amityville Horror, Stir of Echoes, and other kinds of movies like these, what they show is actually the ghost just getting other people to do their dirty work for them. Whether that is, you know, convincing people to like kill their whole family or something. That's going to be more of how a ghost would work. But even then, usually ghosts aren't able to even like convince you of that much, typically. They might harass you and torment you depending on if they're a shitty spirit or not, but like it doesn't get physical, and it doesn't even manifest as quickly as it usually shows happening in these movies. But even still, I mean, even with the little things, as much as like locking doors or other stuff like that, not really. Like a door isn't just going to magically lock like that. There might be some physical manifestation, you know, in terms of personal experiences. I can say that for myself, I have witnessed lights turn on out of nowhere, radios turn on out of nowhere. Little stuff like that has always been a sign to me that someone is around or someone's doing something. But in terms of like locking doors or like dragging people around, no. Like what? Definitely ain't got no one fucking levitating up in there. That ghosts don't do that. But okay. But again, despite all these things that these movies do wrong, right, with like portraying ghosts as physical attackers, portraying them like 9 times out of 10 as these evil things, trying to exorcise demons by summoning the fucking demon, all these kinds of fucking things, despite the fact that they get all this kind of stuff wrong, again, they don't get everything wrong. As I was saying, a lot of times the ghosts are also shown as different forces entirely, which we will get into. So when it comes to things the movies get right away, as a witch, I could tell you that any kind of, especially negative spirit, as I was saying, they're not going to physically come after you, but they are going to get in your head. And the way they do that is by looking for fracture. You will notice that a lot of the times in these movies, there's something going on underneath the surface before the ghost even starts kicking up, right? Like in the Amityville Horror, the original dad of these kids has recently died, so this husband figure is kind of like an outsider, and it's made apparent that he's still being treated like an outsider. So that kind of fracture in this new house is kind of a way for a ghost to get in and persuade him that, you know, this resentment that he might not even acknowledge that he has should be acted out on the family, right? With all this kind of crazy violence that happens within that. And other times, again, as I said, the ghost is just trying to get help for themselves. And they can't just kind of like send you a kindly worded letter. They have to try and do what they can to show you what's going on. And whereas Stir of Echoes, as silly as it is, whereas this one makes it seem like you have to go under hypnosis or like have your third eye open to see a ghost, the reality is that no, anyone can have these kinds of experiences. Anyone who a ghost is trying to get to can, you know, have these flashes of dreams or see these little signs or anything else like that. As we were talking about with St. Anthony's tongue, even St. Thomas Aquinas mentioned that God can allow spirits to go down and give us these tiny little signs to let us know something, to give us some kind of message. And so with these movies, that kind of manifests as these ghosts trying to, you know, maybe trick people mentally, or try and like show signs of what happened to them, or try and show in dreams what's going to happen. Like, yeah, stuff like that can happen. And again, it's very, very mental. And this is actually where movies like Oculus are really fun to me, because this is really what to me makes ghosts so scary. Scarier than some fucking serial killer, or scarier than, I don't know, a werewolf or a zombie or some bullshit. The ghost makes you question your perception of reality. In Oculus, right, when the girly girl is taking a bite out of an apple only to freak out and realize that she took a bite into a fucking light bulb, yeah, that's horrifying, right? In Ghosts, they can absolutely kind of mess with your perception in that way. They can, you know, if you say like you're not paying enough attention to what you're doing, or you're not fully present in what's going on, or you are like too tired, too exhausted, they can absolutely do a little bit of sleight of hand, play a little bit of tricks on the mind that can have you doing stuff that you wouldn't normally do. You can get that gut feeling that has you going to a place you don't normally go to. Why? I don't know. Something's just compelling you to go there, and if you follow that lead, you might very well find yourself not always in a dangerous situation, but definitely in a informative situation, right? Ghosts, they manifest through means of quiet psychic I don't want to say manipulation, but basically manipulation, right? Where they're trying to, you know, they're trying to hook your attention, they're trying to redirect you, they're trying to do these little things, because that's what they have the capacity to do. They're not physically here, so they got to work with what they got. And if we're circling back to like exorcism and stuff too, the one thing I will say that the Pope's Exorcist especially really got right to me, not only just about exorcism, but about how demons work especially, is that you have to reflect on yourself. You can't just go into an exorcism acting all high and mighty and like you're better than the demon, when God knows you've got a lot of skeletons in your closet too. So in the Pope's Exorcist, we see that like Father Amort and this other priest that is coming to like help him out, they've got their own issues. They've got their own guilt. They've got their own sins. They've got their own whole thing going on. And King Asmodeus absolutely goes and uses that to needle the shit out of them, right? And that's where a lot of times when you see people who work with demons, demonolators, occultists, they'll tell you that demons really are just holding up a mirror. And if you don't like what you see, that's not the demon's fault. That's your fault for being a fuckhead. As I was watching the Pope's Exorcist the whole time, I was kind of like, how are y'all not recognizing that, like, he's testing you. He's here to put the screws to you the way a prosecutor does in court. Obviously, he's got his own things to prove about you, and you can either let them be true and, you know, fail this test and run away, like we see a lot of these priests do in these fucking exorcisms and other movies, or you can confront it head on and then overcome the demon, which is what they do in that movie. That's why I love it so much. They overcome their own things. They understand that, like, they have to, you know, ask forgiveness, but also forgive themselves, move on, and not repeat the issue. And that's when they can kind of band together and really get this thing done. Obviously, there's a lot of kitschy, goofy shit that happens in there. Again, this is why I love this movie. It's so camp. It's so Catholic Gothic, and I love it. All that kind of fantastical shit will happen, you know, in the mind palace in meditation, but not actually out there like the movie says. That's all Hollywood. But still, the point stands that exorcism is something that requires you to look inward, that requires you to handle your own shit before you try to handle someone else's shit. And demons themselves will absolutely show you the things you don't like about yourself, not even to torment you like a lot of these movies even say or show, but to just say, do you like this? If not, go do something about it. The end. I guess it makes it easier to do something about it if it's being portrayed to you as the oppressions of an enemy that you can then defeat. If it's just like a therapy session, then I guess that doesn't have the same kind of punch. But nonetheless, as I was, you know, reflecting on these movies, watching them over, I realized, yeah, there's a lot of shit they get wrong. There's a lot of shit that's very silly in these movies. And there's a lot of shit that, like, if you don't know any better, is going to make you spooked entirely. Other ones we haven't even touched on is ones like Hereditary. Really cool movie, but like King Payment as a demon is nothing the fuck all like what they showed in that movie. So obviously, as a witch, as someone who, you know, is in this world and has met a lot of these spirits, I've met King Asmodeus, I've met King Paimon, as someone who's had my own ghostly experiences, no, if you're looking at horror movies as a fucking source for like what these spirits are like, you're so no. It's not accurate really much at all. There are some base things that they get right because there are just so many ghost movies, but there are also a lot of things they get wrong. And I think now we should talk about why they get them wrong, which the answer is actually a lot more mundane than any of us would probably expect. And that is that at the end of the day, in fictional media, ghosts are simply a literary device. This is a good time now to bring up actually these two things right here. This being my first iteration of what I'm showing you, this being the second, but this is actually my thesis that I did in my undergrad on ghost stories. What I did basically in my last year of my undergrad, because I majored in creative writing, I did a whole honors thesis about the function of ghosts in ghost stories. And it was really cool because the whole time before that, I had thought that I was like too dumb to write horror or something. Because I was like, no, to write really good horror, you have to really build up the atmosphere and it has to be intelligent. You have to do all this stuff. Which if you've seen any ghost movies that are made like in modern era, seems to just not be true. Now all you need is a big loud bang and a bunch of shitty jump scares and boom, you got a horror movie. So nonetheless, I was under the impression that you had to be really smart to write stuff like horror and mystery and all these other genres because you have to build this tension, you have to do all this stuff. And I couldn't do that. I wasn't smart enough, which obviously is not true. Anyone can write these genres, right? And I definitely learned that while going through this. But the first half of the fucking whole situation I had to do was read a lot of ghost stories. So I was reading things, right, like Stephen King's Bag of Bones. I was reading things like Toni Morrison's Beloved. I was reading things like The Winter Ghosts, like Peter Straub's Ghost Story, all these other things that were really, really interesting and just had some like classic representations of ghosts, others that were very much more obviously fictional. Right, like if we're talking about how ghosts don't physically manifest, yeah, Toni Morrison's Beloved is definitely on that list of shit that just doesn't fucking happen. In these stories, it's very obvious that ghosts themselves are often mirrors. And so that's where, when I went to Emerson, I took a book design class where I had to, you know, design something, as you see right here. I took those stories that I wrote for this, that was the second part. I took the stories that after I researched, I then decided to try and write, and I put them into a little anthology here. By taking a stab at it myself, I really, really cemented the idea that ghosts, especially in fiction, are meant to reflect something about us, to highlight something that people psychologically are running from. And this is why, especially in these movies, you're going to see a lot of times, as I said before, the ghosts are preying on some spot of fracture. The ghosts are trying to get to you psychically. The ghosts are trying to connect with someone who has a story that mirrors the ghost story, right? They do this because they represent basically an inner turmoil that these people are going through. And classically, as I was going through this, I learned that in Gothic horror, especially with ghosts and stuff, there were two types of ghost story. There was the ghost story where there actually was a ghost, right? There's a literal actual ghost and they have to like defeat it somehow. And then there's also the ghost story, more like Haunting of Hill House, and more like Turning of the Screw by Henry James, where we're not sure if there's actually a ghost. We actually have no idea. It could all be in the character's head. It could be a ghost. It's more likely that the character's just gone insane. So those are two camps of ghost story, and they're both very interesting, and they both essentially have the same end result, which is that you have to deal with something going on with you. You have to deal with something going on in your, family, right? Generational curses, some kind of family trauma, some kind of personal trauma, some kind of issue that is being preyed upon by this psychic entity, by this non-visible entity, this entity that can take any form, can absolutely haunt you, drive you crazy, give you no rest, right? That is something that, to me, again, makes it scarier than any other horror monster. Because the monster, at the end of the day, is really your own self. That's what you get with the ghost story. And that's why this little thing I made, in the end, I called it Spectres in the Mirror, a horror anthology, right? The whole point is that ghosts, as a literary device, are simply, just like demons actually do in occultism, holding up a mirror to every ugly thing you don't want to admit, every terrible thing going wrong in your life that you want to pretend isn't happening, and force you to confront it. And so, when you remember that fiction at the end of the day is not a fucking documentary, then you remember that you can get away with getting stuff wrong like that, right? You can get away with making these ghosts not real, as like witches and occultists and mediums and all that stuff understand them, and just use them as basically a prop, right? Use them as a literary device. Play up the drama, play up the fantasy, do all that kind of stuff, because it's not about being accurate to fucking ghost hunters anymore, right? It's about being accurate to the emotional and psychological core of the story. And I think when we remember this about these movies, right, as much as we want to say, like, these movies are dumb and they represent ghosts and demons so wrong, when we remember the point of fucking literary devices like this, it makes it a lot easier to give some grace to the writers, to understand that even if it's goofy, stupid, and, like, spirits don't work this way whatsoever, it's not about that, right? It's not about the real physics of ghosts, whatever those are. It's about the characters. It's about the underbelly, right? The ghosts are just basically a symptom of a very deeply underlying issue that the narrative should be taking the time to unwind and figure out. And this is where, like, I get really upset with so many modern ghost stories that are like the fucking Tarot movie was so stupid the second I saw that this was coming out. Of course I watched it and it was dumb, but as soon as I saw that, I said, oh fuck, here we go, right? We're just fear-mongering and doing stupid shit with tarot cards now. All of these kinds of things, they're just like very goofy, very like just trying to make a buck at the box office and not really exploring anything deep or interesting is the problem. For me, a good ghost story doesn't have to get it all right with the ghost. Doesn't have to. Of course, I will still notice and I'll be like, huh, that's silly. Or when I watch characters make dumbass decisions like in Marianne, I'll be like, are you out of your mind? Why would you do that? But a good ghost story to me at the end of the day has to be one that tackles that kind of psychological issue, has to really unwind and push through that issue. See characters finally accept the issue that they've been running from and figure it out. And that's when the ghost or the demon goes away. So I have so many ghost stories swirling around up here that I have to write. God, I have like at least 3 that need to be written right now. And I think eventually, you know, as I'm kind of finishing The Glass Witch, right? I've got 1 book left in the trilogy of The Glass Witch to write. The Glass Witch and the Wraith Queen are already out. I think as I take a break from that series for a bit, I'm definitely going to have to switch track into this kind of gothic horror, into, you know, just supernatural horror, and start picking this back up again, because I love this genre. I love reading this genre. I love everything about this stuff. Like, God, there are so many good books. There are so many good books in this genre that I think are better than movies about this, honestly. So, in case you were wondering, in case you were ever watching movies like The Conjuring and thinking to yourself, is this like at all real to life? Is this accurate? Do witches or occultists have anything to say about this? The answer is yes. We do have something to say, and the answer is no. They are not very accurate. So, but they also don't have to be. They at the end of the day, they are just stories, and they're just here to tell us something about ourselves, as most stories tend to do. Just keep that in mind when you watch all the goofy movies, and try to look at them try not to judge them for what they say about a ghost or a demon, and try to judge them more just on how effectively they analyze, right, identify, interpret, and solve the issues going on with their characters. That's really the measure of a good story, in my opinion, not only as a witch, but as a fiction writer. So, with all that said, I will see you guys next time for some more good chats. I have, you know, fun little goof for next week, and I will leave you to it. See ya.